What does succession look like in an Iran that's at war? The wait continues after last Saturday's assassination of the Islamic Republic's supreme leader of nearly 41 years. We'll ask about calculations and delays in the nomination of a successor to Ayatollah Khamenei. This as Israeli and U.S. bombs continue to rain down, and Tehran continues to put up a fight with drones and missiles launched at Saudi oil fields in the direction of a NATO base in Turkey. Despite the destruction of its navy and Israel's vow to kill whoever succeeds Ayatollah Khamenei, can the regime outlast the enemy? It's counting on a state apparatus that's really unmatched by any of its Mideast neighbors. What form will the regime take going forward? And what about the civilians still reeling from January's horrifying crackdown on nationwide protests that were leaderless? Are they running for the hills or preparing for the next battle? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Iran's wartime succession. With us from Boston, IRGC, whose books include Shadow Commander Soleimani, the U.S. and Iran's global ambitions. Your latest piece for The Atlantic magazine argues that Khameneism will be buried alongside Khamenei. We'll ask you about that. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
We'll be joined shortly by Aida Tavakoli, co-founder of We Are Iranian Students. And you see him behind his computer constantly news gathering, Ershad Alejani, reporter and editor at France 24's fact-checking and citizen journalist website, The Observers. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Reminder, if you're on the go, you can listen to the show wherever podcasts are streamed. Yeah, it's day 5. The news of the day is that Iranian frigate sunk by the United States, the repeated pounding of major cities, including big explosions in Tehran after dark, the delay of 3 days of a funeral procession for Khamenei, and a succession perhaps delayed. Some media had predicted the name of Ali Khamenei's successor would be announced this Wednesday. So far, nothing. Tony Kerrigan singles out 3 names that are coming up often in conversation.
A council of 88 Shiite clerics may be close to appointing a new supreme leader for Iran, a decision which Tel Aviv and Washington await with interest, as the Israeli defense minister told X.
Any leader appointed by the Iranian terrorist regime to pursue a plan to destroy Israel, threaten the US, the free world and the countries of the region, and to oppress the Iranian people will unequivocally be a target to eliminate, whatever his name and wherever he may hide.
The long-running favourite has been Mojtaba Khamenei, the late supreme leader's son. He is close to the Revolutionary Guards, a hardliner in the image of his father. But some have reservations. He is low-ranking as a cleric, and the supreme leadership was never supposed to become a family dynasty like the Shahs. Also slated, Hassan Khamenei, the grandson of Iran's very first supreme leader and an ideological rival to Mojtaba. More moderate, but not radically so. He condemned the protesters, not the repression, during the recent uprising in December and January. Meanwhile, on purely clerical terms, Ali Reza Arafi has the strongest credentials. Already sitting on the Interim Leadership Council, he has presided over prestigious seminaries, is one of the 88 on the Council of Experts, and also has a spot on the board of the Guardians of the Revolution.
IRGC, before we go into who the successor to Ali Khamenei might be, your thoughts on delay in the nomination. Some had said it would come as early as this Wednesday. So far, nothing. And a delay even in the lying in state period in the capital.
The reasons for delays are clear. First of all, of course, Iran finds itself in wartime conditions where there are clear threats that the new leader could be eliminated. Any group that wants to consult for the new leader might be eliminated. We had an attack on the building of the Assembly of Experts, even if they weren't there. So they're pretty prudent about that. But it's also clear that no candidate has a majority yet. They need to get to majority of the Assembly of Experts. It's a very unusual group of mostly really old clerics, many of whom are, I'm talking really old, and many of whom are not really political, many of whom are not really that active, some of whom have probably passed away, and their seats I'm not sure all the 88 seats are been filled. I think they are probably, but anyways, so there is no majority, and there is a contestation over who should the candidate be, and some wanted to go a little further. I think they had to change the law, or at least bylaws or regulations, to make the elections online.
Yeah, because they're working
all...
remotely, it seems, after this strike on Tuesday in Qom on the building that houses the Assembly of Experts.
Even before they were meeting remotely, and I think you had to also, in the middle of a war where the internet is cut off for many people and there are connectivity problems, you have to hook up all these old ayatollahs to the internet and teach them how to Zoom. And any of us who have done that with our loved ones know that it can take a little while. So this explains why there are delays. So there are operational reasons, but also there are political reasons. I mean, I think there are deep disagreements over who should be the next supreme leader. Obviously, it comes as a position that comes with a lot of power, and it's as events importance. It will help determine the next chapter of Iranian history, at least for a little while. So, and we've seen some public disagreements. Some clerics have attacked each other publicly, and a hardliner Iranian cleric Rasai, who's a former MP, he's a current MP actually, I think, he claimed that the interim leadership committee can only last for a week per constitution. Now, this is a lie. The constitution does not put any limit on how long the interim leadership committee can be there. But he said that, and another cleric publicly rebuked him. So this is clearly a point of tension, and supporters of Mojtaba Khamenei and supporters of other clerics are kind of fighting off with each other.
All right, so the name that's come up the most, Ershad Alajani, in the Western press is the son of Khamenei, as just mentioned. Mojtaba, who lost his wife, his mother, and a son that were killed in those strikes last Saturday. Is he the favorite, really?
I think no one knows, but there is another question. I think if he is alive or not, that's another question. I think no one knows at this point that Mojtaba Khamenei is really alive. But to answer your question, I think that constitutionally Assembly of Experts chooses the next supreme leader, but we should not forget that practically IRGC influence is decisive. And
so wait, are you saying that if the Assembly of Experts comes up with a name, the Revolutionary Guards could then force them to rethink?
I think the other way is more probable, that some names that already are okay with IRGC would even emerge during their meetings and during their voting sessions.
Okay, so let's cut to the chase. What does the IRGC want? Do they want a hardliner, or do they want a pragmatist? Remember in Venezuela, the vice president turned out to be more of a pragmatist who's right now, to a degree, playing ball with the United States.
I think we have this view of IRGC as a monolith, united body, but I think even inside the IRGC ranks, there are different voices. We know some of them support, for example, Mojtaba Khamenei. Some of them are close to Mir Bagheri, who is even more extremist than the Khamenei. Or we hear even some parts of IRGC have some good relations with Hassan Rouhani, former president, or other names even emerge, like Sadegh Larijani. So I think...
So there are now 6 names, the 3 that were mentioned in the report, yeah. and the ones you've just added.
I think we should not think IRGC as a monolith, united, homogeneous force of power. There are rivalry between them. There are factions. There are the economic corruption between them, that they each each gang wants to be the kingmaker, to put his their man on the throne. So I think there is a real discussion even among the IRGC strongmen.
All right, Arash Azizi, that's important what Ershad just brought up. The Revolutionary Guards, it's not just a fighting unit, it's a corporation, you might say, since they have their hands in everything in the economy. Do you agree with Ershad that at the end of the day, it's once the Revolutionary Guard agrees with itself that we'll know the name of the supreme leader?
I think Ershad's point is extremely important, the first one, and it's often misunderstood because the IRGC is not a monolith. And when we say it's not a monolith, actually it's not one thing, right? So the IRGC is a collection of different networks, economic, military, and others, right? Let's be clear what we mean by this. So like, who's the leader of the IRGC now? Ahmad Vahid, for example, right? It's not like he will decide something and then the IRGC does that. It's just not how it works. So it's best understood as a group of financial and military elites that are very powerful, and yes, have influence over the assembly of experts. They can sort of put their gun to the head of these guys, not literally, of course, but influence their decisions. And as to what they want, they ran the gamut. They have people who are super hardliners, ideological Islamists. There are people who are more pragmatic, all the way to someone like Hassan Rouhani, as Arshad pointed out, who was former president. And Hassan Rouhani is very important here. He is the leader of the west-facing section of the Islamic Republic that has long sought, reconciliation with the U.S. on ideological grounds. By which I mean, like, he's almost a not pro-West, west-facing is the term I usually use, but it runs very deep with him. This is a guy who in the late 1980s complained about Ayatollah Khamenei in his meeting with Americans, and in fact with an Israeli official who he was meeting to get help. As you know, Israel and the US helped Iran during the war with Iraq in the 80s. So this is who we're talking about Mr. Rouhani. If someone like him ascends to the seat of the supreme leader, as he definitely wants, and he's effectively ran for supreme leader, if you will, unofficially since the last year, I mean, that would be, that would be a very important signal coming from Tehran. And it's not impossible, although it's certainly not the top, it's not where the top bet is on at the moment.
So on this, on Sunday, writing in The Atlantic, Arash Azizi, you argued that mostly to save face, Iran's new leaders, is a quote, will likely continue to hit at American and Israeli targets in the region for a little while, but in time, those in charge will probably be willing to strike a new bargain if it extends the regime's lease on life. A lot's happened in the 3 days since. Do you stand by those words?
Yes, definitely. I think this is the perspective I've had for some years, to be honest, even before the war. So it's because people like Rouhani, people like Ghalibaf, people like Larijani, most people in key positions of power in the Islamic Republic kind of know the jig is up. They know that you can't just wage perpetual revolution against the world, right? That you need to come to some sort of a modus vivendi, integrate yourself in the region, seek economic development, and become a more normal country. I think they understand that. Now, world works in complicated ways. So just because they understand that and they know that's the path they need to go down on, is not necessarily that they will be able to do it or that they'll be able to have a soft landing, especially because the region has changed so much now. United States and Israel on a roll. This week, I have just published a new piece in The Atlantic, maybe 10 minutes before we began this show, about the plans the U.S. and Israel have to stage an invasion of Iran by some Iranian Kurdish groups from the West, adding a ground element to the war that is going on. And that can also change the calculations. But yes, ultimately, I do believe that, as I said, much of the caste currently running the Islamic Republic do have a pragmatic and technocratic bent, which means that they'll be amenable to some sort of coming to an agreement with the U.S. And the revolutionary fervor of 1979 that was really identified by a guy like Ayatollah Khamenei, who his last act really shows what a character we are dealing about. This is a man who really welcomed his own death, quite clearly, right? He didn't try to hide. And not only that, he took his family members, including, he didn't have pity for his young grandkids. He knew their life would be in danger. He took them there effectively to die with them. And, this, it's in some Hollywood movies, this might be seen as a good thing, but for a leader of a country, it shows an absolutely a willingness to sacrifice, your own life, but also that of your country. And that kind of a spirit, that kind of revolutionary zealotry is not present in the same way amongst the current rulers of Iran, folks like the men that I mentioned. So I do believe that they'll be amenable to some sort of a compromise at some point.
All right, Ershad Alijani, this is the argument I've heard ever since Saturday between Iranians. Some saying that you have Ali Khamenei. He knows he's got prostate cancer. He's 86. He can have martyrdom during the holy month of Ramadan, and so knew perfectly well that they were going to come for him at this compound last Saturday. And others who say no, he was waiting. He was completely caught off guard. He thought they wouldn't be a daytime attack. Is there evidence one way or the other?
I think if we look at his life, I think it's a life full of miscalculations, internally and externally. With supporting Ahmadinejad, anonymizing whole country, it was a miscalculation, and we saw how it ended for him. Just some month ago, he said there won't be a war and we won't negotiate. There was a war, there was 2 wars, and they had to negotiate 2. And I think in every single step that he took as a supreme leader, we can see that he made a huge mistake. And I think the last act of his life, that having a meeting with high-ranking officials in his compound, was his last big mistake, as far as I see. Just a point about what Arash said, I think there is a war now between the survivalists of the Islamic Republic, like Ali Larijani or Hassan Rouhani, as Arash mentioned, and another part of the power structure inside the regime, as I can describe as maybe suicidal. The problem is that this suicidal part, they are looking for the martyrdom, they have guns and they have ideology. But the survivalists, they don't have gun, they don't have ideology, and they don't have support of public support, because people made it clear through the multiple protests in last 5-6 years that they hate Larijani as they hate, Ali Khamenei, for example.
So the 23% of Iranians who turned out to vote anyway in the last presidential election, are they opportunists, pragmatists, or are they zealots?
A mixture of above, all of them. I think Iranian society, again, is not monolith. You cannot say that everyone who voted for Pezeshkian, they are reformist. Some of them, they could be pragmatists. Okay, maybe we should have someone who live with. It's better than Saeed Jalili or something else. I think there are different reasons, several reasons to go outside and cast your votes in the Islamic Republic. I think we cannot categorize them that everyone who voted in the last elections support regime, or they are the fan base of the regime.
All right, we're pleased to welcome the in-demand Aida Tavakoli, co-founder of We Are Iranian Students. Again, we've been talking about the fact that some had reported that we'd have the name of the successor to Ayatollah Khamenei already. It's not happened. Your thoughts on whether, reading the tea leaves, they're headed for a pragmatist or are they headed for a hardliner?
Well, to add to what Ershad just said, I do know some people who actually voted at the last election that are against the regime. But, confronted to all the risks and the hope and then the despair and then, the killing of the mass murder and how sometimes, we think of the best solution and we don't find it. And so I know that within those people who actually voted and participated in the last election, there are people that are firmly against the regime as well. And we should not forget those who are pressured to do so and, threatened with their family. There are also people, the Iranian civil society is a lot more complex than what we think. They are not, the supporters of the regime on one side and the revolutionary people on the other side. It's sometimes within one family you have people that support the regime, the kids, the teenagers that are firmly against and are, debating every night, sometimes fighting really hard with their parents. And it's not like within the youth as well. It's a mixture of, very different colors. It's this is why people are fighting for a democracy, actually, because there are so many different political opinion, religious thoughts. Some of them are spiritual but not Muslim anymore. Some are against the political Islam. Some others are against Islam, in general. So I think to understand what is happening, we should always keep in mind that the majority of this very diverse civil society has proven in those past few years that they do not want this regime anymore. They want to get rid of this dictatorial regime. They want a democracy where all of their diversity can live actually freely and have the same right. And so whoever comes next actually will become the next, Ali Khamenei, the next person we should get rid of, the next person we should fight against. So I know that the vast majority of we're talking about 80% in the last polls that the Ghanem Institute realized. So it's, a vast majority of Iranian people that do not want the system anymore and want a fall of the regime and a secular democracy.
Again, Arash Azizi, the chances that the successor to Ayatollah Khamenei will be like Shapur Bakhtiar, that short-lived prime minister when the Shah left for exile before the revolution took over?
First of all, I wish we had someone like Shapur Bakhtiar today. He was a great socialist leader. He was killed by the regime, because he was sort of effective leader in exile, which we don't have. Look, it's not a great analogy, because at the time the Iranian revolutionary movement led by Ayatollah Khomeini really had wind in its sails, and it was clear that it would have chances of power and really limited the space for Bakhtiar. But it is true that the next leader might be short-lived, either because he might be killed in the war with the U.S. or Israel, or he might be overthrown in the event. So there is that chance. But as things stand, it's likely that whoever occupies the supreme leader position, the real power would lay elsewhere in the regime, and those folks will. There is true that they will have a transitionary role in a way. That Iran is changing. The Islamic Republic is not going to stand. Islamic Republic that we know it, of 1979, of Khamenei, of Islamism, of death to Israel, of death to America, of mandatory hijab, of this Islamic Republic is not going to last. It will not. It does not have a future. But what will it be replaced with is another question. And look, I mean, to Aida's point, Iranians who are pro-democracy, which I consider myself a part of, right? We have failed to organize our ranks to be influential enough to be able to now be affecting this transition. That's why we need to sit down. You think I want to sit down and talk about Larijani and Ghalibaf and this Ayatollah and that Ayatollah and listen to like old Ayatollah speeches to figure out what the future of my country will be? No, but we have to do that because the rest of us, due to regime's repression on one hand, and the lack of ourselves to put our differences aside have failed to organize so effectively. So that's what we should do in the coming years. We should organize. The fight for democracy in Iran goes back at least to the 1906 constitutional revolution, and we need to organize on that basis, build political forces, so that we are able to be in the driver's seat and affect those things. But we can, and I have to say, one has to be brutally honest. I've always believed that, for many of my compatriots, Iranians have naive, childish ideas about politics that is disheartening to me. For example, right now they're like, oh, well, I can't believe that Khamenei is gone, but the regime has stayed, and we have to, deal with the rest of the people there. What did you think it was going to happen? What miracle were you hoping for? How did you think all of a sudden Khamenei is going to get killed and we're going to get to a democracy? So I think one should be honest and tell people this is what it takes. If you want democracy, you need to build for it, and you need to build the social basis for it, and you need to organize for it. And that's something we haven't done.
All right, and another precinct heard from on that score was the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who spoke Tuesday evening from the White House in the company of the German Chancellor.
I guess the worst case would be we do this and then somebody takes over who's as bad as the previous person, right? That could happen. We don't want that to happen. That would probably be the worst. You go through this and then in 5 years you realize you put somebody in who was no better. Well, most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, we had some in mind from that group that is dead.
Most of the people we had in mind, Aida Tavakoli, is this what we just heard to be dismissed as noise, or do those words matter?
Every word matter, actually, I believe. Donald Trump was very clear from the beginning of this war that his aim, his goal was not regime change. He said during his 8-minute speech, he first talked to the American people, explaining why the bombs were falling in Iran already. Then he explained that maybe American soldiers would be, hurt or die during this war, because this is what happens in war, in his words. And then he talked to the Iranian civil society saying, well, our objectives are the nuclear weapons, then the missiles, and then when we are done with those two things, then it's going to be your turn to go again in the streets with a regime that will still be armed. And then try to overthrow this regime. And you should be very thankful for this opportunity that I'm giving to you after a war and mass murders in January, because this is the opportunity you were waiting for, because I'm a great American president. So the problem is that he actually is doing exactly what he said he would do, meaning that he's targeting what is threatening the American interest, which I do not, criticize. He's the American president. He was not elected by the Iranian civil society. I completely agree with Arash. This is our responsibility to organize and to present an alternative. But I also agree on the fact that we should not be naive. We should not think that because the bombs are falling in Iran and that Khamenei is dead, then the dictatorship is dead. The dictator is dead. It's not the same thing. And if we want this, military sequence to be followed by the fall of the regime, which is uncertain, because we know that when it's only airstrikes, we know that the probability for the regime fall is very low, close to zero. But if we want this military sequence to be to end with the fall of the regime and with a secular democracy, there is so much work to do still, and a lot of people are not conscious of it.
And what did you think when Donald Trump appeared to dismiss the question from a reporter about Reza Pahlavi, the son of the late Shah, as a possible solution?
I think it shows that in the mind of Donald Trump, which is completely understandable, the priority is to shorten this military sequence, which cost is getting really, really high at a military level, of course, but also financial, economic, strategic, you know. So he wants to shorten this and get back to stability inside Iran, the way he did it in Venezuela, meaning that he would talk with moderate people, because he said that, you know, the people that we killed, they were fanatics, they were really bad guys, but now they are moderate people we are talking to. So within the regime, he's trying to make a deal, to getting the regime to comply with the US conditions, and then the civil society, the Iranian civil society, will be left with this failed regime, but still armed and ready to kill everyone to stay in power.
Ershad Alajani.
I think the worst case scenario here is that there is no scenario. And I think we are living that. I believe that different voices, contradictory voices that we hear from the Trump administration shows that they don't have any specific plan for the coming days. Rubio says something, Trump says something else, Hexet says something, another thing. Rubio says Trump says we want democracy for people. Hexet the afternoon says that it's not our job to bring democracy for the Iranians. Trump share pro-Pahlavi contents on his social network. When he was questioned by the journalist, he says, he's a good guy, but I prefer someone from inside Iran. So I think we are living the worst case scenario, that there is no scenario. They don't know what they want to do. I think they had this idea that they can repeat some kind of Venezuela-ish plan, and it didn't work, and they are just improvised.
All right, another precinct heard from, and you mentioned they're not always singing from the same hymn sheet inside of the Trump administration. After that U.S. submarine off Sri Lanka sank an Iranian frigate and with at least 87 killed, the same U.S. Secretary of War who 2 days ago vowed that Iran would not morph into an Iran-style occupation had this to say.
The first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II. This is not a mission accomplished situation. This is simply a reality check. The combination of U.S. and Israeli intelligence and combat power will control Iran, and will control it soon.
Will control them soon. How's that going to go down, Arash Azizi, inside of Iran?
Well, it depends. It wasn't clear sort of what the actual plan is. And I think, as Ershad said, we sort of see a situation in which there is no real plan. I think, well, they control the Iranian skies. That's one thing. But then what do you do with this control? What's the plan? And there's a few plans we've talked about. But I think ultimately they'll probably have to talk to someone. Look, they have two broad choices. Either they have to strike up an agreement at some point with someone inside the regime, accept that they hold the power now and impose certain conditions on them, or expand, push on at the huge cost to themselves and the region, eliminate further layers of the Iranian leadership, and basically force some sort of a capitulation on Iran, so that the nature of the power in Iran has fundamentally changed.
And that brings up a point you made earlier in the conversation. We saw Iran's Revolutionary Guards claiming responsibility for Tuesday's strikes over the border on an insurgent camp in Iraq's autonomous Kurdish region. The exiled Kurdistan Freedom Party says drones hit a camp that houses its families. We could show perhaps an Institute for the Study of War map, which displayed Tuesday's strikes just for the day of Tuesday by Israeli and U.S. forces. You could see red dots around the capital, Tehran, but also a large number of hits in the Kurdish parts of northwestern Iran. Also Tuesday, CNN reporting that the CIA is working to arm Kurdish forces with the aim of fomenting a popular uprising in Iran, adding that President Trump spoke by telephone with Mustafa Hijri, that's the leader of the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan. So could there be, Arash Azizi, boots on the ground, just not American boots?
Yeah, so I mean, I also have a report, as I said, that was just published on this, and I go into some detail into what's, what are the plans there. Sure, they could attempt an invasion from the west by Iranian Kurdish forces, and that, but Iran, I think that would be a tremendous mistake. It's a strategic mistake by the U.S. and Israel to do that, and it's a mistake not only because it's terrible and it will possibly lead to civil war in Iran and unfavorable conditions for everybody involved, really. But also operationally, I think the regime is rather well suited in dealing with it, frankly. It can muster up to 1 million people in uniform, and fighting a ethnic insurgency is something that it knows what to do. It was born doing it in 1979. It is likely to be able to gather some forces and suppress it. And even if it didn't, even let's say if the Kurdish forces are able to liberate, as the quote unquote as they call it, parts of Iran. Kurdish areas of Western Iran. Well, then what? I mean, do they think they're going to march on Tehran, or what do they think is going to happen? Some people think, well, they'll draw down some security forces there, but then that will lead to uprisings in other parts of Iran. It appears to be a bit of wishful thinking. I don't see how that could happen. I do know that it will lead to terrible bloodshed, quite likely the type of ugly sectarian ethnic conflict that we unfortunately know too well of in the Middle East, and have bad consequences in short and long term. So, and out of that, a state collapse and civil war is unlikely for anything democratic to emerge. I want to remind us all that a few years ago, with a beautiful Kurdish slogan of woman, life, freedom, Jan Jian Azadi, that came from the Kurdish regions, millions of Iranians united. Their slogans was, from Kurdistan to Baluchistan to Sistan to all other parts of Iran, but based on a civic struggle, a democratic struggle of wanting a different Iran, a ethnic-based armed insurgency. It's something quite different, and I think it will lead to quite different reactions amongst the rest of Iranians.
And that brings us to what is the mood right now inside of Iran. Aida Tavakoli, do people want to pick up a gun right now? Do they want to fight peacefully? Or are they still reeling from that bloodbath of the month of January?
Well, they don't have guns, first of all. So even if they wanted to pick one, they don't have guns. They are unarmed civilians. They are under bombings, so they are very worried. The bombings are very close to they target some residential buildings, and they are close to other residential buildings. My family has been, very close to the areas that were bombed, and we know that it's going to be intensified in the second stage that Donald Trump talked about. We also know that the Tehran is completely locked because of the checkpoints, so it's very difficult to get out of the city. The roads, it takes like 26 hours to get to get from Tehran to another city because of this tremendous traffic and the fear of running out of gas, because we know that a lot of gas stations have been closed or bombed. So people do not take the risk to take the car and try to flee Tehran, get to the checkpoint, and then run out of gas and stay in the streets under the bombings. So logistically, we have to understand also what is a war. War is people dying every day. It's mass destruction. It's the Islamic regime that hopes for the number of civilians' death to increase and to feed his propaganda against the U.S. So they are very worried. And also they don't know the outcome. And this is where I believe, and I completely agree with Arash on that, I believe that faced to this huge improvisation of military sequence with no defined outcome, with people that do not have the same interests, Netanyahu does not have the same interests as Trump. Inside the Trump administration, no one agrees. We should be the one as Iranian, in the diaspora, as activists, to actually be proactive in choosing the outcome. The Iranian civil society have been tremendously brave and proactive those past few years. Every time they took the risk to die, going in the street to tell us what was their choice. Their choice is the fall of the regime and a secular democracy. This is where we have to be brave. We have to, put our difference aside, our debate aside, prepare them and keep them for the moment we can debate in a true democracy in Iran and be unified here and pressure the European Union, especially because they are the only actors that actually have an interest to defend the interest of the Iranian civil society. Why? Because the entire political model of the European Union is threatened by everyone, by Trump, by Putin, by all the autocracy around the world. And the political, economic, and social model of Europe is democracy. And if they are the first, the only power that actually allowed the first secular democracy to be born in the Middle East, they could regain actually their status worldwide. So this is why the opposition activists with the European Union should actually work for an outcome that is just, that is also faithful to the European and the Iranian civil society political model. And this is what we should do now.
All right, so for eyewitnesses that Ershad Alajani here present spoke to, it's a mixed bag. For instance, listen to this one Tehran resident reacting to the weekend bombing of a Gandhi hospital in the capital.
News like this is saddening, whether it's a hospital, school, or markets. People are supporting the attack on the regime, but if it's their businesses, if hospitals, schools, shops, or other places that belong to people get damaged, I think it's unlikely that they'll continue the support.
We were just waiting for something to happen, because on the 8th and the 9th of January, we did all we could do. And we understood, even with millions of people on the streets, you can't accomplish anything. So it definitely has to happen from outside. That's why everyone is already ready for war. All the regime's news is fake news. When you watch Iranian television, the statistics they present, claims like we hit this or we sunk that, are all illusions.
Who want outside intervention and those who don't?
Yes and no. But obviously there are two camps. There are many people who are against this military campaign against Islamic Republic. There are many people who think that they have no other choice rather than this. What I'm talking on a daily basis with Iranians, many Iranians right now, is that obviously not all of them, but most of them, they think that there is no other option, and that's out of desperation. They are desperate. They say we poured in the streets by millions. They killed us by dozens, about thousands of tens of thousands. What we can do more? That's a sentence that I heard several times during the last couple of days, and but there is a huge but here, is that as one of our observers in Tehran said, that if it continues, this military campaign hit the civilians or hospitals, schools, etc., they lose the public support for this military campaign. And backing to your last question about the military invasion from neighbor countries, I think that's another element that impact hugely the support for this coalition attack on Islamic Republic. Many political figures, even Reza Pahlavi, who has been in support of both Israeli attacks on Iran, he came out and published a video on social media and alerted about such an act. So I think it's a very bad idea on multiple levels. First, that it diversifies and it's not uniting. And second is that there is no doubt that it's going to end to massacre. It gives another excuse to a bloodthirsty regime like Islamic Republic in Tehran to massacre more people.
And we look forward on that score to reading Arash Azizi's latest piece then in The Atlantic. Arash, I want to thank you so much for being with us from Boston. I want to thank Aida Tavakoli, Ershad Alejani of the France 24 Observers. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.